Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I thought I would sit down and do a video for you guys and gals. Well, let me get a sip of my water first. Get my beautiful radio voice going, and let's talk about this. All right, so something I want to talk about with this, I definitely warmed back up to the idea of body part splits a couple years ago, right? I had clients who were running on 3-day programs due to their scheduling, life, everything else, who I had put on basically squat, bench, deadlift programs. And guess what? They all made really good progress. And they were not noob lifters. They all trained hard. They all did the movements I told them to do, and they did the stuff that I told them to do, and they got results. And this needs to be discussed because this is something I really kind of shifted on a couple years ago, but haven't really implemented in my own training, only for clients. And then when I do it in my own training, some people are like, oh man, this is a flip-flop. And it is. In this case, people always like to use that term. In this case, though, it is based on evidence and observation. And what we need to be clear, I had a position that was not what my position was when I was younger. I used to do body part splits when younger, and I was big and strong back then. I deadlifted over 600 pounds and all that. Doing bro splits, but with the power lifts and stuff in there, really heavy. So I trained it that way just like everyone else. As I did more research and reading and studying all the various programming of different strength coaches, even before I was doing YouTube and I started doing the tubes in 2012, I came across all this data showing that muscle growth, in theory, might only last for up to 48 hours after we train any given muscle. And so when I look at that and I look at the full body programs, that's why I reintroduced some of that stuff. Help push some of it out there. It was already trending, and I helped push it out because people need to remember, I actually had a very big following relative to the size of YouTube at the time, 12 years ago. So yeah, I pushed all that stuff out. And I think it helped people because it got people back to the basics. And I had people doing, hey, let's do big, heavy barbell-based programs where that's most of your work, and let's throw a couple isolation movements in, right, for your arms and things. And it did work great. And then all that time I kept with that because the evidence, I thought the evidence showed the stuff with muscle protein synthesis. But what it turned out later is that the data just wasn't that good. These were not very many studies. They were small scale, and larger scale studies started showing it doesn't really seem to be the case. People doing once a week, as long as volume was matched, made great gains. In some cases, as long as they trained hard enough, even when volume wasn't that good. We've seen cases where people doing 10 or less sets a week saw fantastic muscle growth, even training a muscle once a week. It kind of falls back to what we saw for years, because when I started out, I still got good results doing the other stuff, right? I got good results in my 20s doing regular splits. Most of the guys I knew had phenomenal physiques did those splits. Now, granted, most of them thought some of the Arnold type training was crazy, the really high frequency, high volume, all those things. So, we have to be realistic about this. And I even had made videos earlier this year kind of explaining, look, how do some of the guys I know who had phenomenal results, either insane strength or insanely impressive physiques, oftentimes did 3-day-a-week splits. And I said that years ago when I put some of my clients on that type of training, and it worked just fine. As long as we programmed it good, it worked. What did I tell people? I had the guy who had the most impressive physique I ever saw did a 3-day-a-week program with low volumes. He did less than 10 sets of muscle group. And it wasn't even like what I'm doing. I'm talking, he might do 1 or 2 types of curls. I'm talking like 3 to 6 sets of curls a week and be done. He'd do some pull-ups outside of that. Okay, but so really, when you start looking at a lot of his stuff, is really like 6 sets per muscle group. But he trained hard. But the guy really did something like maybe 6 up to 10 on a couple muscle groups, so sets per week. His workout for like 30, 40 minutes, and he was out of the gym. Done. Guy looked freaking amazing. That guy was around in the YouTube era, looking how he looked at 40, he'd probably have a pretty big channel. Same thing, I talk about some powerlifters I knew who had phenomenal numbers who were like, yeah, I have a squat, bench, and a deadlift day every week. They train 3 days a week. Come in and squat over 800 pounds. Granted with knee wraps, but still. I think that's still pretty dang strong. Bench over 500. Raw. Guys were training like that. So when I look at all this and I look at the way that we've seen historically and I look at the data, I go, the data that I was going off of, the evidence that I was going off of with those old assumptions isn't really supported. And other data has come back and showed, no, the other works as long as the training is dialed in right, the frequency isn't that important. But it gives us certain wiggle room. It gives us a different outlook on training. It's a different way to approach training. And so that's what I'm doing with my own training. And I'm going to make it work. And I have a feeling it's going to work pretty dang good. Why? Because it's making me really focus on all the body parts more. As I have stuff split into a 4-day split, everything hit once a week, I'm coming in and really thoroughly working muscles. I mean, you guys are literally watching me do, hey, let's do preacher curls and incline curls on my arm day. Let's do closed grip presses and 2 different angles of extensions to hit the long head. Okay, and let's train hard on them. You start doing that sort of stuff, I think my arms are going to start growing again. We're probably going to see some arm growth. Same thing, what happens if I do, after my chest, I do some shoulder stuff. I think people are going to be surprised I'm going to do more with the leg thing. We saw a return of the old school belt squat, which we know I got good results doing before. So I don't have a leg press, I'll do that. And then, I bit the bullet. And again, I've kind of said, I don't think sissy squats are that great. It's kind of like when goblet squats, I used to say that years ago, that I really look at what Dan John was saying about them. Okay, you guys remember that? And I said, Dan John's a pretty smart coach. He's got more experience than I do. He's got at least 10, 15 years of experience on me. And very successful experience. Maybe I should look at what he's saying about goblet squats. Lo and behold, I did, and I still use them for some of my clients to this day. I'd consider using them again myself. That was going to be what I considered after the belt squat. I was actually going to start doing goblet squats, but then I looked at the sissy squat further. I know a couple of really good lifters with good quads who do them. I've gone and looked at some of the data, looked at the biomechanics. It's like, yeah, it makes sense. Mainly, I didn't like the name sissy in it, which is funny because they're actually pretty hard. But again, we have to set aside things and say, look, I'm wrong. And if we're wrong on something and we have other tools available, it doesn't mean the other stuff didn't work. So I want to be clear, upper lower splits work great. I built 600-pound squatters and 700-pound deadlifters doing those. They do work. They clearly work. But so does this other. Just like those different exercises, I could look at them and go, you know what? Done correctly, preacher curls can work great. Are they an injury risk? Yes, if you do them wrong. They're very dangerous. Snap your bicep up quicker than a deadlift will. Do them correctly, they're phenomenal. Same thing with a sissy squat. I've looked at it and said, I've seen people tear quads, but it's like how they're setting the bench wrong. Not doing it correctly, okay? You have to be open to these tools. You have to be open to new data. And this is something I've been saying for years as a coach. For years as a coach, I've been saying every single year that I have coached, my knowledge has doubled. Every single year, year after year after year. For the last 5 years, my knowledge has doubled with every year I get a coaching and more experience, looking at what other coaches are doing different stuff with my clients, learning more. And that's going to carry over to the channel. I've told you guys that for a long time. That's going to carry over to this channel. Stuff is going to go in different directions. And now, particularly now that I'm moving more towards working on physique finally, because people always try to think that I really did. I really didn't work on physique. Now I am, and it's improving. And we're going to continue that approach. And I am going to do a lot of new things, as long as they make sense biomechanically, as long as they make sense in terms of the way the body adapts to training. If they look like they're going to work, I'm going to run with them. Because they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I think that you can. and we have to keep leveling up. And for me, as someone who wants to keep putting out content to help everyone, we have to keep leveling up. I've already taught all you guys how to get elite squats and deadlifts. We've already done that. We've already done that. It's all there. You guys can go back for the past 10 years and look at that. Now we're going to look at a lot of other stuff. How do we maximize hypertrophy? How do we balance out certain different muscles? How do we do this stuff? How do we do all this while getting leaner and while staying within our recoverable volume all the time and not getting over fatigued? Okay? Again, we keep skilling up. It's important. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.